Box office top 10 this week. At number 83, I mean, we're going a long way down.
Wow.
Here, this is Freaks versus the Reich.
I mean, this is actually the context in which The Day the Clown Cried came up, because I was talking about that and saying that, whenever you're dealing with the Third Reich, there is always the question about, is there a certain way in which you can deal with it? Are you able to do something which is satirical or funny and actually the problem for me with Freaks versus the Reich, which has some interesting ideas in it, is that I don't think it ever properly reconciled those two elements. I mean, it's got a very interesting score, and there are bits of, carnivalesque visuals, because it's about this kind of circus troupe who resemble the characters from The Wizard of Oz taking on the Reich, and they have superpowers. But it's at over 2 hours long, it leaves you a lot of room to go, I'm not sure that this works.
Number 54, The Disappearance of Sheer Height, which we talked about last week.
Yeah, two things I want to say. Firstly, on the I Stand Corrected, I realised all the way through the review, I think I said it twice, I said narrated by Dakota Fanning. I didn't mean Dakota Fanning, I meant Dakota Johnson. Literally completely different person, but both called Dakota. So thank you to everybody on the YouTube channel who went, you don't mean Dakota Fanning, you mean Dakota Johnson, Kermode, you idiot. However, there was somebody who said, it's pronounced Sherry. No, it's not. It's all the way through the film, it's pronounced Cher, and then some people who know her and seem to know her quite well call her Sherry. But it is all the way through the documentary, her name is pronounced Sheer Height, and some people call her Sherry.
Number 11 here, number 7 in the States, Night Swim.
Haven't seen it, and I'm not likely to now, because it seems to be sort of just pootling around in the shallows.
Yes. Number 10.
In the shallows.
No, I got it first time. Okay. Number 10.
Tell me the first line from it. You see, I pitched you a softball.
Yes.
And then, okay.
Number 10 here, number 8 in the States, The Boys in the Boat.
So this is the George Clooney film about, there was an email earlier on that referenced the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
It was.
It's a very solidly done drama. It's not particularly remarkable, but the rowing scenes are weirdly gripping, and I know nothing about rowing.
Well, here's some people who do. Piers Herman. Dear Sweep and Skull, second-time emailer, the first about the fab Opunake cinema in New Zealand with sofas for chairs, they got a mention, and long-term listener if 2010 counts as long.
Sofas for chairs, jumpers for goalposts.
Thank you. Piers says, my wife Dominique, always pleased of a mention, and I went to see The Boys in the Boat on the opening day last Friday. We both very much agree with Mark's assessment. Good, solid movie that is not going to win any awards or change the world, but a really enjoyable way to spend 123 minutes. Yeah. And the first film to really show how hard rowers really work.
Right, yeah.
What made it much more special for us? Two things. We are both rowers, and I sold some of our rowing club equipment, Boat Club in Norwich, to the production company for use in this film. In early 2022, we sold them our old Cedarwood 8, which I imagine means it's a boat made out of cedarwood for 8 rowers.
Exactly.
That's, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Amazingly, the type of wood was really important for them, as was the fact that it was made in Germany, as they were looking to replicate the German crew boat as closely as possible. Looking at the film, it certainly looked like our old boat, polished and repainted, of course, though I can't be sure. I gave a very muted, code-breaking cheer when we first saw it. This incredible attention to detail shows a level of care taken by the filmmakers that I did not expect and probably was not necessary, but it has meant that the club members have a special attachment to this film. We sold them some other boats and some oars as well, and the 1750 showing at Cinema City on the 18th is almost sold out, as so many members of the Norwich Rowing Club are now going. So 3 cheers for George Clooney, Grant Heslov and their company. They have brought us the best rowing film for ages and given our club a great boost as well. And Mark, my brother Paul, sends his best. A Manchester University mate, apparently.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Also, Scott Thomas says, my wife and I went to a preview screening of The Boys in the Boat last week. It was of particular interest to us as our children all row.
Oh, wow.
It had scenes filmed at Moseley Boat Club 5 minutes from our house, and my wife had read and enjoyed the non-fiction book it's based on. Typically for director George Clooney, it's an unashamedly old-fashioned sporting underdog story with a plot and characters as straight ahead as the rowing races it depicts, but also with the same excitement on the way and gripping finish. Joel Edgerton's hangdog coach is the standout in a series of solid and unshowy but effective performances. We enjoyed it a lot, but I had thought I would probably recommend it as a Sunday afternoon movie at home for people without a special interest in the subject matter, though Mark's experience of it makes me wonder if that doesn't do it justice. Anyway, so the rowers like this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me because it definitely, as I said, those rowing scenes are very powerful, and it quite often is the case that scenes are powerful because you do them properly, and you certainly get the sense of the effort and the energy and as I said when I reviewed it, it's not like, skipping over the water like a stone. It's like slogging through water in a very painful fashion.
Number 9 is Wish.
Oh, which is the Disney film which reminds you how much you liked all the Disney films that they're referencing and how little this has any of the magic.
Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is number 8.
Please let this be finished now, because I don't think anybody other than Jason Momoa is enjoying it anymore.
The Boy and the Heron is at number 7.
So I still haven't seen the dubbed version, but I've been told by many people that the dub is really good. As we said, Rob Pattinson does one of the main voices. But certainly in the subtitled version, I thought it was lovely. Joe Hisaichi's score is terrific, and it's funny. Some people have been a bit lukewarm about it. Some people haven't quite connected with it, but I think it's a proper Miyazaki passion project.
Priscilla is at number 6.
Very interesting film that reminded me of things like Rebecca. It's like a kind of twisted fairy tale about a young woman, very young woman, being trapped in this strange castle, which is Graceland, in which she's, so there's a lot of Beauty and the Beast going on. And it's a very interesting companion piece to Elvis, which I love very much. And obviously as an Elvis fan, I've said this before, it's not comfortable watching, but then if you know the Elvis story, it isn't comfortable.
Here's my favourite email, probably, of the show today, from Camilla, but not that one.
Right.
The listener who was put off Priscilla by the people near him in the cinema chatting about Graceland's carpets and the legal age of consent in West Germany put me in mind of a screening of Louis Malle's Damage at the NFT in 1992.
Yeah.
As was expected in a tale about sexual obsession, there was a good deal of furious jumping throughout the movie.
That has now entered the lexicon, hasn't it?
Which is a Poor Things reference, which we'll get to in just a moment. And doing the furious jumping, Juliette Binoche and Jeremy Irons. They were just really going at it in the bathroom. Perhaps one of the most erotic scenes, when one half of the elderly couple behind me said, "We've got those taps." Thing is, I could hear me saying that. Carpet's a bit rough. Down with the usual and up with an independent cinema. Thanks, Camilla. Number 5 is The Beekeeper.
Can I just say very quickly, that always reminds me of the fact that, as was always pointed out, in the first Emmanuel film, which came out in the early 70s, and it was like, it's so erotic and it's so classy, couples can go and see it, blah, blah, blah. And there's a famous scene in Emmanuel when she has sex on an aeroplane. And everyone's like, it's such an exciting scene. The reason it's exciting isn't the sex. It's the fact they're on an aeroplane. It's like it's the 1970s. It's like they're on a plane. Anyway, sorry.
I don't remember that scene. The Beekeeper is number 5 and number 2
Jason
in America.
Statham. Okay, he's the beekeeper. He keeps bees, and then somebody does something bad to somebody he really likes. So then he has to sort out the hive, and every now and then the hive produces a worker bee that joins up and has to overturn the queen. And I mean, it's preposterous tosh, but I really enjoyed it.
One Life is at number 4,
which is very good and very moving. We've had a couple of emails from people saying when they get to the end of it, the audience have been silenced by it.
Anyone But You is number 3 and number 4 in the States.
Well, the new rule is that any film by Will Gluck, who had the enormous chutzpah to come on the show after we had kicked Peter Rabbit all around town, metaphorically, not literally, gets a pass here.
Number 2 is Poor Things. So let me just do some emails, and then you can talk. Sam Mullinger, amateur stateside critic.
Yeah.
I went to see Poor Things with my girlfriend recently, and as a Yorgos Lanthimos fan, I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting into. While my girlfriend was unfamiliar with him, one of our first dates was watching Panos Cosmatos's Mandy together.
Yeah.
So she's usually up for something a little off the beaten path. I'm happy to report that we both loved it. It might be my favourite film of 2023.
Excellent.
Emma Stone was absolutely fantastic as Bella and made the off-the-wall premise of an infant's brain in an adult's body feel completely believable.
Which is no mean feat.
No, that's right. It was dreamy, but the kind of wild, anxious and strange dream that you have after eating something that's disagreed with you.
Oh, it hasn't.
Yes, so I'm editing as I go along here. Elton. Now, Elton starts this email by saying, Heritage listener, Take Two correspondent, as yet untaken for Take One, but then I was responsible for the longest email ever on Andor and the Iliad, excruciatingly inflicted on Simon last Christmas when he had a very bad sore throat. I am still very sorry. Anyway, Elton, I have to say, I have edited this as well.
Okay.
Because here is the key point.
Yes.
In his Poetics, Aristotle is concerned to explain, so this is still about poor things, is concerned to explain and justify the power of drama. Quote, from childhood, he explains, people have a natural thing for imitation. Children learn by copying. Lanthimos rather brilliantly represents this process through Bella, God's creation, and holds a mirror up to it, as Rami Youssef suggested in Simon's gently revealing interview. Though I'd put it rather more strongly, watching the film, I felt that my head, like Bella's, had been prized open and my brain scooped out for a new one. I learned to see again what film can do, how social relationships form and what they mean, what female empowerment looks like. Hello to Jason, up with blue-dressed feminists and down with all Duncan Wedderburn's...
Duncan Wedderburn.
Yes. Who's obviously reference to the film, and their ilk. Now, but before you say something here, Peter Kirby says, I went to see Poor Things based mostly on your Film of the Week recommendation. At first, it was a strange, if interesting, setup, which turned very quickly into an appalling film about a girl with a child's mind being horribly abused. Whilst one can recognise some of the filmography and the well-shot scenes, I cannot understand how in this day and age, the idea of a person with juvenile mental age who has no concept of consent who is so abused and manipulated can be praised. I think that a reflection on your portrayal of this film needs consideration, that the abuse portrayed needs to be publicly acknowledged and condemned. And I just want to mention, just in that vein, Alice Thompson, who was writing in the Times yesterday, also says, the misogynistic violence and repetitive sex is supposed to be tempered by this is a reference to Emma Stone, artlessness and innocence and the way she upends social niceties. Halfway through the brothel scenes, I was done. I closed my eyes and dozed, blah, blah, blah. Everyone will hail it as a triumph, and it'll have a cult following, just not me. It didn't feel like a feminist rewriting of a great novel, more a male fantasy about a ravishing nymphomaniac dressed up as a modern classic.
Well, thank you for both those emails, and those are points that have been made, as you just pointed out from that elsewhere as well. You could argue this in terms of the actual narrative. The narrative says at one point she's learning however many words it is a day, and her development is massively accelerated. So who Bella is at the beginning when we very first meet her, and who she is 2 weeks later in the plot, is completely different people. Very early on, she's doing this thing about using quite complicated language and talking, So the whole point about it is that, and this is explicitly said in the film, her brain is accelerating really fast. She's not growing up at anything like normal time. So, although at the very beginning the idea is that it's childish brain in adult body, very quickly it isn't that anymore. And what she's then, and I think actually in your interview, Emma Stone did try and talk about this, because you said, I think you raised that issue about when you first see her, she's like a kind of, what did you say, fully functioning
baby? Yes, she's a grown-up baby.
But that's very quickly not the case. What happens after that in terms of her kind of her approach to the world isn't to do with her being young, isn't to do with her being a baby or a child, because she's reading great works of philosophy and she's outthinking everyone around her and she's being incredibly... What it is that she is a fully functioning, intelligent adult who hasn't been formed in her ideas in her philosophy by ideas of guilt and shame. Now, the plot very specifically says this, and I would point out once again, it's a fantastical science fiction plot that is inspired by Frankenstein. In the real world, these things don't happen. But the plot itself very, very clearly explains that she is not a child after the very, very early stage of the film. I think on a more complicated level, we take that's what the film actually says. Are people looking at it and seeing her as a childish woman? And I don't think that's what she's portraying. As I said, I think what she is portraying is a fully functioning, intelligent adult who has not been schooled in the ways of shame and misogyny that are in the society around her.
And not a male fantasy about a ravishing nymphomaniac.
No, I don't think that is what it is at all.
Okay.
However, I would say, obviously, you can interpret it as you wish. And I'm not for 1 minute dismissing those ideas, because it's not like those ideas didn't cross my mind about, is that what's going on? I've seen it a few times now. I'm absolutely certain that isn't what's going on. But I do understand people feeling uncomfortable. I think that the fundamental premise of the uncomfortableness is not what you think it is. I think it's a misreading of the film.
And on the other hand, at number 1, Wonka, and number 3 in America. Just a moment, because we've discussed at great length what an incredible hit Wonka is.
Absolute. And perhaps it says something about the times that we are in, that the best-selling film of the moment is a lively family fantasy based on, one of the great children's fiction characters, because when things are bad, when things are grim, people don't want that in the cinema. And I think actually, incidentally, that would be the challenge that, for example, a film like The End We Start From, although I think it is ultimately very positive, it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to say to somebody right now, with everything that's going on, do you want to go and see a film about a mother fleeing flooded London because society has fallen apart?
Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos, because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's Take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.